Good afternoon and welcome to our next lesson on elimination. This is 6-3C elimination, and the big thing in today's thing is there's going to be no opposites, all right? So make sure you have that title on your notes, and we're just going to go over a couple things. So first of all, go ahead and hit pause when I get off the screen and copy this down. All right, so first things first. In order to solve any of these systems of equations, you must have opposites. Okay, you have to have an opposite no matter what. Next, what you're going to see in today's problems, there's going to be no opposites. So if there's no opposites, we're going to basically, we're going to create them. We're going to create the opposites, and we're going to be using multiplication, right? So it's very important. We're going to be using multiplication today. And then again, just a reminder, what is an opposite? An opposite is you have different signs. So one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and then they have to be the same thing, right? Maybe 5x and 5x's or a y's or a 17a. But one has to be a positive 5x, a positive y, or a positive 17a paired with a negative 5x, a negative y, or a negative 17a. But we're going to see in today's problems, we're not going to have this, so we're going to have to use multiplication to make it. So let's move on to our first example. All right, so here is our first example. It says 4a plus 7b equals 11, and we have 4a plus 6b equals 10. So if we take a look at it, we have the same signs, okay? So I have a 4a and a 4a, but the problem is there's not opposites just because they're the same sign. They're not different. And then these two don't even match. So if you have the same sign, right, but you have, so on this one, and we've seen this before, all I need to do is make one of these negative. So on this one, we're going to use negative 1 as our multiplication. So I'm just going to multiply negative 1 to the bottom. So I'm going to use that negative 1, and when I multiply it, it's going to change everything to negative 4a. That's the key right here. It's having that different sign minus the 6b and then negative 10. And then I'm just going to copy this one right above it. 4a plus 7b equals 11. So now I have my opposites, right? I have the same number, but I have different signs. So you see how I use the negative 1 to get the different signs. All right? So I'm just going to go quickly through this to solve this one. So these are my opposites. They add up to 0. 7 plus negative 6 is a 1b, and 11, I'm sorry, I forgot to put my negative on my 10. Don't forget that, because it was 10 times negative 1. So 11 plus negative 10 is 1. Divide by 1, divide by 1. B equals 1. And then I'm just going to take this b and put it back up into one of my equations. So I'm going to use the top equation. So I'm going to go 4a plus 7. And I'm going to, instead of using b, I'm going to put 1 equals 11. 7 times 1 is 7. That's 4a. Minus the 7, minus the 7. And that gives me a 4. That's my 4a. Divide by 4, divide by 4. And then a equals 1. And remember, these should be in ordered pairs. So I'm just going to put the a first, and then the b. 1, 1. All right, so again, what was big on this one is this had the same number, which is good, but we didn't have the different signs. So that's what the problem was. We had to use -1 on this one. All right, so we're going to look at number 2, which what happens if a different scenario. So make sure that you have all this copied on down. All right, so here's our example 2, and I put in quotations different numbers. But again, we got to look for our opposites. Well, opposites are different signs. So here's our plus and minus, which is great, but we have to have the same number. Well, I got a 10 and a 2. They're not the same. So that's why I said we have different numbers. So we have a problem here, but that's what you're looking for. What's the easiest way to make an opposite? Well, if they give you a plus and a minus, then it's usually easiest to turn these two numbers and try to make them match. All right. So again, now we have to use multiplication. So, well, what I need to try to do is I need to try to get a positive 10, but also a negative 10. And then so we just have to think, well, what do I multiply to make a 10? And so the magic number is going to be a 5. So I'm going to put 5 right over here. Draw my arrows. All right, so there's my 5. So again, this one I'm just going to recopy down. So that's 5x plus my 10y equals 15. So that's just the first one. But now this one down here, we're going to change using multiplication because it will give me our opposites. So 5 times 3 will give me 15x. 5 times my -2, and that's why we're doing this, is -10y. And here are my opposites. But again, don't forget to carry that 5 all the way through. So I have to go 5 times -7 is -35. So you see how I used multiplication to create our opposites. So again, I'm just going to quickly solve this one. So 5x and 15x is 20x. Our opposites cancel out. That's why we have to use them. 15 plus -35 is -20. Divide by 20. Divide by 20. And my x equals a -1. Right? So I'm going to take this -1 and I'm going to plug it back into one of the equations. I'm going to plug it into this top one. So we're going to write 5. Instead of x, I'm going to put -1 up there. So -1 plus 10y. So there's our equation with our x being substituted. So we have a -5 plus 10y equals 15. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. (10y) equals my 20. So my y equaled 2. So I'll put these together. -1, 2. All right, so that's what you do if we have different signs, which you need for opposites, but we don't have matching numbers. All right, so we have one more example. So make sure that you have all of this copied down. All right, so here's our third problem, and it is a real problem. And the fact that if we examine it, we have a 6x plus a 2y equals a 4. And then down here we have a 10x plus a 7y equals a -8. So we don't have anything looking or resembling opposites. We don't have matching numbers, right? 6 and 10, those aren't the same numbers. 2 and 7, not the same numbers. We don't even have different signs. These guys are both positive. These guys are both positive. So we have no makings for opposites. So we're really going to have to use multiplication. And we're going to actually, for the first time, have to change both, that's right, both equations. So you get to decide. Do you want the x's to match? Well, 6 and 10, probably the closest number that they equal is 30 or 60. 2 and 7, that's a little bit easier, right? Because 2 times 7 is 14. So I'm going to actually try to create or make a plus 14 and a negative 14. So that's going to be my goal. I want to make a negative 14 and a positive 14. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So now I got to start thinking of my multiplication. Well, what times 2 will give me a positive 14? Well, I can just use a simple number 7. So I'm going to go number 7 right here. All right, so let's convert this one first. So remember, use your calculators, whatever you need. So 7 times 6 is 42x. 7 times the 2 will give me my 14y. And then 7 times 4 will give me 28. Right? So again, just distribute that 7 to all these numbers, and that's where I get these. Now, remember, now I need a negative 14 on the bottom. All right, so to get that negative 14, I have to times this 7 by a negative number, right? Because a negative times a positive will make a negative. So I'm going to use a negative 2. So, what's the negative 2 going to do? Well, negative 2 times my 10 will give me a negative 20x. And most importantly, it's going to create my opposite. So, negative 2 times that positive 7 is going to transform it to negative 14y. And then negative 2 times the negative 8 makes a positive 16. So that's the hardest part. They don't get any harder than this, is you actually have to come up with 2 numbers in order to create matching variables. And that's what most of all today's homework for this assignment is going to be based on, creating your own opposites. So again, we'll just go quickly through this. Well, this is going to add up to 42 minus a 20 should give me a 22. 28 plus 16 will add up to 44. Divide by 22. Divide by 22. And x will be 2. And then we're just going to plug it back into one of these equations. You can plug it back into any one of those. We'll plug it back into this one. So we're going to go 42 instead of x. I'm going to put a 2 here. Right, and then we're just going to quickly solve this. That's going to make an 84 plus 14y. Two-step equation. I'm going to minus the 84. Uh, 28 plus negative 84 is going to give me a negative 56. Now, so I'm going to divide by my 14. And my final answer for that will be y equals 4. Put them together. All right, so make sure you got this. Get this all copied down. And have a math-tastic day.